Hi, Jagmeet. Thank you so much for meeting with us today, Jagmeet, and happy Nowruz to you.
Thank you so much, Mamnoon and Tashakur, and Nowruz Beiruz to you and all the listeners and people tuning in.
So, what were the highlights of the past 12 months for yourself and for your caucus?
I would have to say dental care is number one. That we got dental care for kids under 12 started. That means for nearly 500,000 Canadians, their children, 500,000 children in this country can go get their teeth looked after and get up to $1,300 to cover the costs for their dental needs, which is pretty historic. That's going to be expanded by the end of this year to include seniors, children 18 and under, and people living with disabilities. That's a lot of people. It's going to be millions of people that are going to be able to get their teeth looked after with a national program where you go to a dentist or hygienist and the bill will be paid for by the federal government with this national program. So excited by that. We were able to send a lot of people, 10 million Canadians, a little extra money to help them out with the cost of the groceries by doubling the GST rebate. We also helped millions of Canadians with their rent, with the rental subsidies. So helped out people in a real way. I'm proud of that. There's a lot more that needs to be done, but those are some of the highlights.
What is your estimation of the time that we can have a full dental care?
So by the end of this year, it'll cover a lot more people, millions more, and that's going to be so not too long away. It's going to cover nearly every senior in our country. Like I said, children under 18 and people with disabilities. After that, the next phases of the plan will come out. So by the end of the agreement, it'll cover everyone in our country who earns less than 70,000. They will get coverage, which is going to be about 9 million or more Canadians. Some estimate as high as 11 million. Then ultimately what we want to do is make sure dental care is a part of our healthcare system. That's something that we're aiming towards. But we'll start with the people who need it most, and then we'll work towards making it universal. It's also a cost of living. It'll help people with the cost of living because if people who don't have benefits, they'll have to pay out of pocket. I spoke to two seniors, a couple, and both of them need root canals. So it's about $1,000.
Wow.
And so $2,000 for a family that's on a fixed income is very, very difficult. And when I told them that we were going to cover their dental care by the end of the year, they started getting tears in their eyes because they couldn't avoid this cost. It's going to cost them a lot of money, but they couldn't afford it, but they needed to pay for it. So now we're going to cover it and they can use that money for their bills, for the groceries, for other things. So it really is a big relief for them.
Okay, thank you. So the past year was also the beginning of the woman life freedom revolution in Iran. And I wanted to ask you, what can we learn from the resistance of people in Iran towards the Islamic regime and people of Afghanistan against Taliban?
I think we can see a lot of power in any revolution where it's being led by women. And it was inspired by women, led by women. That's really encouraging. And it's a resilient revolution. It's not going away. People thought maybe after some time, the noise would come down and people wouldn't be as committed. But we're seeing the opposite. People are more committed than ever. People in Canada are committed. They're supporting their family back home. And there's a real strength to this movement. So I think one of the things we learned is when women come together and are the leaders of a movement, it is very powerful. And then brothers and fathers and uncles are supporting the women, supporting their sisters and their mothers and their cousins. And that is really important too. That's a solidarity. And I would see, some women chanting, women, life, freedom, and then their partners or their relatives or the men that were also supporting them yelling just as loudly. I think that is a very powerful thing when people come together that way. It shows that this is a revolution, not just a protest, but truly a revolution.
Exactly. And for us who live outside Iran, it's so important to support our friends and families who are living in Iran, whether from Iranian diaspora or Afghans. And we have always heard that Canada claims to be a champion in democracy and in human rights. So I would like to ask you, how do you assess the response of Trudeau's government to what is happening in Iran?
I would say not strong enough and not quick enough. So we need to take even stronger steps because there's a lot of people that are in Canada that have been hiding their money. and stealing money out of Iran and hiding it in Canada. There's a lot of people that are associated with the regime that are trying to intimidate people here in Canada and are threatening people. I've heard from a lot of people that they're being threatened by these people who work for the regime. They come to Canada and they threaten people that are showing up to protest by saying, watch out for your family back home in Iran. So this cannot happen. There is a registry, or there's a path set up now where people can go forward and raise concerns. We need to see that really acted on, that we need to see authorities quickly respond. If someone is intimidating someone, it's got to stop. If someone is embezzling or committing fraud or money laundering, that needs to stop, and those assets should be seized. So we need to see more strength there and more urgency. We need to see Canada work with allies to apply pressure on allies to support those that are demanding freedom.
Great. And this is something that we as immigrants and new Canadians look forward to see the support of the Canadian government. And you mentioned wonderful things, and this is what we are looking for. How can we take practical steps, Jagmeet? So this is all lovely to say, but how can we make sure that it is going to have an action? Like there should be it is going to be an action.
I would say continue the pressure. The Iranian community in Canada has been very vocal. I think that pressure is working. Keep on raising concerns. Use the tools that exist right now, and try to identify people that you know that are working closely to the regime. And that way, if we see the community is using the tools and they're not working, then we can say, listen, it's not working. We need to put more emphasis here. We need to put more effort there. It's just not working. And then internationally, this is the one that's the bigger one. What international pressure can we continue to ramp up? Canada needs to work with allies. We can't work alone, but we need to use our position of influence. Canada is a well-respected country globally. And with such a huge Iranian diaspora, we should be working with other countries that have diasporas and say, our citizens are worried about what's happening in Iran. Let's come together to apply pressure to demand basic human rights are respected, people aren't being mistreated in their communities, that people should be able to protest without being afraid of losing their life, being targeted and attacked, their families being targeted and attacked. These are real fears. So ramping up the pressure locally, the Iranian community is doing a great job. I'll continue to amplify your message. Then using the power we have, or using our position internationally to ramp up pressure, is another way to get some practical steps.
Okay, great. And now that we are on this topic, I'd like to mention IRGC, that the government claims that IRGC cannot be mentioned as a terrorist organization, and at the same time we exempt those people who did their military service in this organization. Do you agree with this statement? And if so, how can the government fix this? So we exempt those who passed their military service because they had to, it was obligatory, but they are not part of this terrorist body.
Right. I think there's always challenges when you have a system in place where you need an exemption. I was a lawyer before I got into politics, and I know it's very challenging to set up a system in the first place, to label a group as a terrorist, and then to have exemptions. There's going to be problems with that. So what I would like to see happen is really target every and all senior official, name them, target them, sanction them, have severe economic sanctions. I think really the way to hit people that are violating people's human rights is hit them where it counts, their bank accounts, hit them where it counts, their homes. And so really targeting with severe economic sanctions, that's where you put a lot of pressure, because a lot of these groups, a lot of these people associated with the regime are seeking to have a comfortable life in Canada. If we can find better tools to economically sanction them and make it so they can come to Canada and have a life of luxury and comfort here, that is a very powerful thing. So I would really emphasize more economic sanctions, strict and severe sanctions, targeting people involved, targeting those that are decision makers. And that's the approach where you can get the best results.
Okay, great. And do you think we can have a proper way for the people who know these people to report them to the government? Like if there can be a website specifically for this matter, not a broad website which says that, oh, if you know of any fraud, come and claim it. just for this specific matter, because sometimes people even have documents. They know who is this person, who they are related to, so they can easily communicate. And that's government's job to make sure that it is a legitimate claim.
Really good point. Right now, the idea has been to tell people to report it to authorities, but maybe that's not the best way to do it. And so looking at a better way, is it better to go to a website that everyone knows about and you can put your information there and make your claim there? It's a really good question. I just want something that works, and I'm open to looking at it and finding the best solution. If it's not working with the going to the authorities, then we need to look for alternatives.
Okay, great. So maybe we can work on this in the new Persian year.
Yes, that's something we can work on
Yes.
during for Nowruz. Exactly.
Okay, great. How do you see the government's response to the atrocity of Taliban toward our Afghan sisters and brothers?
What really troubles me, first of all, it's horrible what's going on in Afghanistan. We're seeing regular reports. Children can't go to school. Women, young girls can't get educated. Lots of oppression, lots of human rights violations. Then on top of that, people are starving. There's major issue there as well. So all these are very, very concerning things. And on top of all of that, we have a situation where those that helped Canadian forces, the people that provided help at a risk to themselves, were not able to be evacuated. So I'm really worried about that. I feel like Canada didn't do enough to get our allies, the people on the ground that helped us out. We didn't do enough to get them to Canada safely. And now the big question is, how can we provide humanitarian relief while still denouncing the regime, because the Taliban clearly is not respecting human rights. So that's the challenge now. How do we get help to people on the ground, but at the same time not want to work with a country that is being, or not work with a government that's being ruled by people that are violating people's human rights? So this is the challenge. But I'm really heartbroken to hear about how bad things are going and how much challenges people are faced with.
Totally agree with you. Unfortunately, it's heartbreaking. And what would your caucus want to be done to help people in Afghanistan and Afghan people in Canada? Anything you have in the planning?
Yeah, one of the things that's become really clear is you can't have outside military come in and try to fix a problem unless it is supported by the people on the ground. So we need to be very careful that any solution moving forward has to be driven by the people, and the people have to be the ones making the decision. It can't be the outside trying to run things in Afghanistan. The Afghani people need to be, the people of Afghanistan have to be empowered, have to be supported to fight back against the Taliban. So that's the big challenge. How do we provide support on the ground and make sure it's focused on the needs and the wants of the people on the ground, not just the outside trying to tell people what to do, but really empowering and uplifting and supporting the people of Afghanistan on the ground.
What are your priorities for this year's budget?
Expanding dental care to make sure it covers children, seniors, and people living with disabilities. School lunch program, we think that's a very good idea to help kids with the cost of food, to help families with the cost of food by making sure the kids are fed. We need to make sure that we are providing support for people, targeted support. So the GST rebate that we fought for, we want that to continue. Healthcare is always a priority. We want to make sure that continues. And we want to make sure that, given that there looks like there's a recession, we need to put in place protections. So if we are in a recession, people get help. We need to make sure we're forcing the government to deliver help for people, and we've got to tackle the cost of living. Housing is important, healthcare is important, and making sure people can afford to put food on the table.
Okay, great. And it's the beginning of a spring. Jagmeet, for the last question, what you are looking forward to in the spring?
To keep on fighting for people. I want the people of Iran to know you can count on me as leader and my team, and we are going to keep on fighting for you, whether it's for justice in Iran or whether it's making sure life is more affordable in Canada. We got your back.